Welcome to the Book Brilliant podcast. Today we have on author Clay Martin. Clay has an interesting background, first joining the military in the Marines, and then he switched over to the U.S. Army Special Forces, also known as the Green Berets. Clay has 4 books out right now, 2 of which are fiction, and then 2 of which are guidebooks for worst case scenarios, I would say. Clay was interesting because he's a friend of the podcast, and a lot of the times when you have somebody on who you've read their books and you're familiar with them and you've kind of studied them a little bit in preparation, when you ask them a question, a lot of the times you kind of know what they're going to say. You have an idea of what the answer is going to be. And Clay, throughout the interview, continued to surprise me with his answers, or in some situations, lack of answers, which I kind of feel bad about because don't mean to put the guy on the spot or do anything that's gonna, jeopardize his standing with the U.S. government. So hopefully I didn't put too much pressure on him there. But it was an extremely interesting interview. It's not an interview that is light, I would say, because we're talking about, again, worst case scenarios. This is not, in my opinion, coming from 2 people who are conspiracy theorists, weirdos, or anything like that. This is coming from 2 people whose heart is set on protecting their community and their family and the people around them if things go bad. Civil unrest is a huge portion of this, but even if we're talking about environmental disasters, which can happen anywhere at any time, as we talk about, these books are good resources. So I hope that you check out his books, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Let's get to it. All right. Well, I've got Clay Martin here today. Clay, thank you for coming on. And the reason why you're here today is because of a mutual connection, which people probably would not have expected. But Tucker Max, the author of I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell and Assholes Finish First and a few other bestsellers, he started talking about doomer optimism. And in some of his interviews, I heard him mention this book, Prairie Fire. And so I had looked you up, and I actually reached out to Tucker to ask him if he wanted to be on the show. And he said, no, I'm not the guy to talk to. You should talk to Clay Martin. So I reached out to you, and I figured you guys were friends or something. But before we had all kind of, I guess, connected, you never knew that he was throwing your book out there?
I had absolutely no idea, man. It was really weird. As you got a hold of me on Facebook, but when you said Tucker Max recommended your book, like, I really thought, because of where you live, that you meant this operator that could be nicknamed Tucker Max from that same area. I don't know, you meant like the Tucker Max. So that was really weird too. I started like a weird chain of events where I didn't even know he was following me on Twitter. My old account got nuked last January 7th. And I kind of started doing this subreddit in very kind of quiet, not like it was before. And I go check, and yeah, he's on there. So we linked up on Twitter and it started talking and stuff. But yeah, it was a really weird. I had no idea. Like,
yeah, I thought that was hilarious. Him and I have had like brief interactions. When I reached out to him, I'm like, I don't expect you to remember me, but I definitely thought that was kind of a funny thing. So, Clay, your book, in the book that I'm talking specifically about, Prairie Fire, and all of your books will be linked on our website, but with Prairie Fire, the guidebook for surviving Civil War II, for a lot of people, that sounds like a pretty extreme title. And I'll say this, and I think that you're kind of along here with me. I don't know if you'll agree with everything I say here, but for me personally, I'm not a conspiracy guy. When I was in high school, I got exposed to all the conspiracy theories, and I believed all of them all at once, and my friend and I thought like Red Dawn was coming, and we're like, dude, we got to get bug out bags. We got to save up. We got to get supplies. So I kind of went through that phase, and I'm at the point now where it's like, since I was in elementary school, I believe like John F. Kennedy was, killed by some mafia or whatever. I actually believe that
that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. So I'm like way not really a guy, but a conspiracy guy. But I do love conspiracy theories, and I love listening to them. I just don't let myself get too wrapped up. But I think that with what we're talking about here, I don't think that you have to be a conspiracy theorist to, number one, realize something's not quite right with society. And number two, to be prepared for an emergency situation is something that the federal government tells us we should be doing anyway. I think the federal government says you should have 30 days of at least 30 days of food at home, right? So when you really break down the fundamentals of your book, that's kind of what it is. So I was going to put that out there. And you're not a crazy guy either. You've got a great reputation. I understand why, as I've kind of gotten to know you a little bit more. So could you actually explain a little bit of your military background? I mess up military terms all the time. I say people are special operations when they're not, and I mix everything up. So could you kind of give us a brief background for you?
Right. Yeah, sure. It's that's a weird thing about this day and age that we live in too. There's a lot. I mean, this is like the worst time in the world to try to fake a military background, because like you'll be found out like very quickly. Although, yeah. I mean, we've seen some weird stuff though, like some wrote entire books or like trained in the firearm space for like 5-10 years before they got busted. So yeah, it's bizarre. But for myself, I did lead kind of a weird career path. I started in the Marine Corps as an infantryman. I became a reconnaissance Marine, which prior to the whole complicated story about the Goldwater-Nichols Act in 1986, but prior to the advent of MARSOC was the Marine Corps Special Operations. Because we had to have our own sniper section, I got to go to Scout Sniper School too, so I was one of those. And then I cross-decked around 2003 over to the Army to Special Forces there. And that's actually not as weird of a career path as people would think. When I first kind of got in the public eye, like a lot of people that didn't have military background would look at that like, whoa, time out. Like, yeah. One, can't be all the things, one. Number two, like Marines don't leave the Marine. Well, yes, they do actually. A lot of us left around that same time. In fact, that was a big piece of what forced the Marine Corps to go ahead and like give its consent to put an element under SOCOM. Was they got devastated after 2003. There was a massive exodus. Good God, it was like probably over 50% of their entire like reconnaissance community was just like, that's it, we're out. And a fair number of us ended up in special forces in the Army. In fact, at one point I was on an operational attachment Alpha with 2 other recon Marines, which was just really, really weird. Like I knew my selection class had 10, 15 guys that like I hadn't seen in like 5 years. Like, hey, what are you doing here? And then one of the weirdest experiences I ever had going down that same road, myself and another guy that I was actually he was in a sister platoon to me when we were in the Marine Corps in recon. We were on the same detachment, and we went to Halo School in Yuma. One of the weekends that we were off, we actually went over to Coronado Island because another friend of ours that was a recon Marine was now a SEAL and was doing his BUDS instructor rotation. So, yeah. It's not that odd. In fact, the last guy that got the Medal of Honor just a couple weeks ago, he actually, same career path. He was a reconnaissance Marine that became a Green Beret.
Yeah, I'd never thought about that. So do you ever feel like when you're talking to people, like you're talking to a guy at a bar or something and you tell them your military background, that you can tell that they're like, oh, this guy's full of shit? Do you ever feel like people don't believe you?
Oh, man. Yeah, totally. 100%.
Okay, man.
Yeah, it's just the being.
Yeah.
just the being in 2 services special operations. That's really weird. Like I said, it's not completely unique in the world that we live in, but it sounds really bad. Like, in fact, sometimes I hold that card like way in reserve until I actually know somebody. I kind of felt like I had to say those things, especially when I started teaching people firearms. Like, I feel like in that space, and that's what I did when I first got out. You can't bullshit that.
Yeah.
All your stuff out there. It's kind of how it is. And people should be able to check that, because if they're paying you money to teach them something, like, it's got to all be there. So, but yeah, it definitely makes for some interesting conversations. Yeah.
What?
You get called on something like that too. It's like some dude that like his cousin was in the Marine Corps band or something. He's like, Marines don't quit. You full of you're like.
That's funny.
I know your cousin pumped gas into CH-46s one time, but some of us do.
Yeah, man, military stuff can be hard too, because I've been around guys who say, like, I'll say, oh, he's a former Marine, and then they'll be like, you're never a former Marine. And then I'll hear guys who are retired from the Marines call themselves former Marines. So it's like, I don't want to offend you guys. What do you want me to do? Now, here's another thing. I think I picked this up on an interview you were in. Were you on a Glock poster at one point?
I was. And for an idiotic reason.
Really?
Yeah, I was like literally the Glock poster boy one time. I kind of had a relationship with Glock. I wasn't like their corporate shooter or anything, but I ran one when I shot competitive pistol and competitive 3-gun. In fact, I took a Glock back to them that had maybe arguably more rounds than had ever been put on a Glock. They told me that. So it was something absurd. It was like 250,000 rounds in 2 years because I was working at a place where I got free ammo. So we kind of had a relationship. And then my buddy, Tom Beckstrand, who's a big, he writes for Guns and Ammo, called me up. And he's actually my former team leader of Special Forces as well. And he's like, hey, check it out. Glock is doing this new ad campaign, and it's all like military themed and stuff. So they want some like real boys to like dress up and stand in front of this MRAP. And this is my modeling career in a nutshell. He's like, they'll give us 2 Glocks. Anyone. Probably cost the company like $100. So yeah, but yeah, they used the hell out of that poster, and it was pretty weird. Like you walk around SHOT Show or something, you're like, man.
That's awesome. I've never met somebody who's been on a Glock poster or even a firearm poster, I think, as far as I know. So when they said you could get any 2 you wanted, does that include the automatic one? Is that the 10? Is that the Glock?
18. Glock 18. No, it did not include the Glock 18.
That would have been what I said. But, all right. Anyone I want, huh? So, okay, so you're in Special Forces. For most people, they probably know that as Green Berets. So why are I think that so Special Forces is kind of like their wheelhouse, right? Civil unrest. What is it about your training? What is it about their mission intel? Most people don't know the difference between any of them, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I just found this out too. Yeah. So what makes the Green Berets, Special Forces, what makes them uniquely qualified to understand civil unrests?
Well, particularly because this is our specialty. The 2 things that we do different than anybody else, any SEALs or Rangers or, whatever, counterterrorism reports, whatever, is one, we have to be language qualified in the region that we work in. So we have to go to a language school as well. Like everybody speaks some kind of foreign language, which for me was Arabic, French, Spanish, whatever.
Wow.
And that's because our primary job, different than everyone else, is to either go in and foment insurrections and make them work or shut them down, both of which require not so much like cool guy commando shooting skills, but this like level of like understanding a populace and being able to influence it and see the other people that are influencing it and either control and guide that to what we want it to do or piecemeal pick the parts out that will make it stop. So it is kind of a unique, it sounds sexy on like podcasts. In real life, it actually sucks. It just takes a really long time, and like there's a lot of like drinking tea and hanging out. But it is a unique skill set. Yeah.
So okay, I got a couple questions on this too. Okay, number one though, on training for that, did you have to go through? I don't even know if this training exists or if this is just on Rambo, but did you have to go through training where you could like be tortured and learn how to like is that a real thing? And did you do any of that?
Not nearly to the extent that it gets Hollywooded. We do, and I don't think this is unique to us, although I think ours is maybe longer, but pretty much everybody in the special operations arena has some form of SEER training at the end of their school. And that stands for survival, evasion, resistance, escape. And the survival part is just, Bear Grylls, like make fires and eat rotten meat, worms and that kind of stuff. The evasion is, run and don't leave tracks. But the resistance part, there is a real thing about that. It's not something we can delve like super deep into because it's something like they keep a pretty close hold on. But you do have to spend some time learning how to handle very uncomfortable situations.
I don't, again, just wanted to know if that was even a real thing. And I figured to some extent it was. Now here's another one that we probably can't dive too deep into. Over the past 20 years, have they been utilizing the Green Beret? I think that, let me back up for 1 second. I think a lot of civilians have this idea, and Jocko Willink joked about it, that before he became a SEAL, he was telling his buddies, like, oh man, we're involved in stuff that nobody knows about. We're always doing secret missions, I bet. And then he said it wasn't as exciting when he actually got in. Have the Green Berets been utilized in ways in the past 20 years that is not public information, or has it and I mean outside of the Middle East? I'm talking other parts of the world that we wouldn't expect, or has it pretty much just been focused on Afghanistan and Iraq?
Our connections broken up. Oh God.
All right. Yeah. Everybody can read between the lines there.
I can answer that, but I have to be careful how I phrase it.
I don't want to get you in trouble.
No, it's fine. There's a way around it. Yes, absolutely. Because we have a secondary job, because all that stuff I talked about before. One of the other things that we do, and a lot of other SOF is kind of getting into this. It's not as much of a primary mission for them, but they are getting into it. We also train foreign militaries all over the world all the time. And there's actually a very specific name for that. And actually, I'm just going to Google it and see if it's common knowledge yet. If it is, I'll say it.
That's all right. I've heard, anymore through podcasts and speeches, guys have been letting more and more things slip. And if you can just kind of read between the lines and pay attention, you can at least get the gist of that. I wouldn't be able to tell you anything specific that I've heard of, but I've heard guys just drop hints here or there that's like, wonder what he means by that.
I mean, one of the most classic examples I know for a fact is not classified because it's in a book. When we invaded Panama in, what was that, 1989, something like that?
Yeah.
All right, one of the first things that happened was 7th Special Forces Group, which was actually based in Panama for a lot of years and speaks Spanish. I mean, way better than any other group speaks their language. Those guys live in Spanish. The first thing they did was they went around to all their dudes they knew in the Panamanian military were like, hey, we're about to just curb stomp you guys. So if you could just take your battalion out in the jungle and hide right here, we won't bomb you. And they were like, okay, cool. And that defense forces, probably by a quarter before a shot was even fired.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, like I said, that kind of comes with the territory, I figure. So yeah, okay. So with what we're about to talk about, I had this thought kind of this morning, was that even if this isn't relevant for 50 years or longer, in your book, and I'm talking about Prairie Fire specifically, and you've got Concrete Jungle, which is a similar one, came out first. But these books are still great to study of what's going to happen when a society collapses, because societies continue to collapse even on a small scale. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, what do you think it would actually look like for shit to hit the fan? And he said, I think it already has. And he said, I think depending on where you're at or who you are, it has already. And I thought about that because, for me, I worked at Budweiser all of the pandemic. So I was good. I mean, that was truly a recession-proof job. I was just fine. It was a little bit scary because I thought, we thought we were going to get sick all the time. But if you were somewhere else, it should hit the fan. Or, if you are a kid who lives in Mexico and a cartel comes and takes over, and I have friends who, I just saw one of them today, who that's happened to them when they lived in Mexico. Shit has hit the fan for you. And it is an apocalypse type scenario. So for different things, for different people, shit will hit the fan. Societies will collapse, and it's good to be prepared for that. And I told you I talk about my experience with it. I live in Fremont, Nebraska. In 2019, we had a flood that made our town an island, and we were an island for a week. You could not get in or out of Fremont except for we have a small airport, right? We were pretty much fine. If anything, people were being a little bit dramatic about it. And I was on city council at the time, and I actually wasn't getting a whole lot of updates because the mayor, the administrator, they're all running around doing stuff. I remember, thinking that there is all these, it's such a crazy thing. And it really comes down to like what this book is about, because it was like on Facebook, people are saying, hey, we need all these people here to go bag up sand and put sandbags out. And I'm like, what the hell? Because I'm on city council, man. I haven't been getting any phone calls or emails, not knowing it's because people were so busy they didn't have the chance to do so. So my brother-in-law and I, we go to put up sandbags, and I show up there thinking like, well, what's going on? Show up and you see the water kind of coming up, and you start to realize like, oh shit. And that's that moment where how's the community going to react? And people are a little bit dramatic about it, but the truth is the community truly did stand together. People came, they used their trucks, they used everything to kind of band together and put out sandbags. One of the most impressive things to me was the Hispanic community. People that couldn't even speak English were showing up, and they were all working. It was just a very incredible unifying moment for the community. But in that time period, some fast food places are kind of starting to run out of food. You're starting to get nervous about the grocery store. And believe it or not, people actually didn't rush to the store and buy everything, which, again, is a testament to the community. I would not have bet that, but like we put out sandbags, we went to the store, wasn't any more busy than like a typical Saturday. So again, wow. That's kind of unique, I think. But, after everything was said and over with, and then I start getting the reports, being on city council, you start getting the reports firsthand. And I started to realize like, oh shit, like we got really close to this being bad, like to losing a lot more than we did. And so I told my wife, like, look, I don't know what's going to happen next year, but we need to stock up on some food. We need to, any supply that I was thinking would be good to have, we need to do that. But that all came in the blink of an eye. I didn't see it coming. I was on city council. I didn't see it coming. Yeah, you heard reports of some flooding, but unless you live next to a river, I mean, who really takes that, seriously or really stops and considers it? It was just boom, can't leave Fremont anymore. And again, we were locked down for a week. So this book is really good for people who live in places like I do, the Midwest, the flyover states, the small counties or whatever, because I think at the heart of that book is really a book about community, having people you trust, and building safe relationships.
Oh, I mean, without question. I mean, that's kind of part of the deal, and it's part of what I wanted to influence with that book is there's like a sliding scale of disasters or collapses for that matter. Some of the historians argue that the Roman Empire fell for 350 years. It took a long time. Things got progressively worse, and sometimes they were better in between those. Sometimes they were really bad. Barbarians with hatchets, everywhere. But there was a lot of in between times where it was just more like, the roads are all banged up now, and Roman coins aren't really worth anything, so we got to switch over to something else. But yeah, I mean, arguably that's kind of where we are. Things are not going great right now. They could get a lot worse, and we address that bad end of the scale as well. But the biggest thing that I've always thought about with this kind of thing, one of the things that most preppers in general is kind of that prepper genre miss is we talk about a large scale disaster. Your community directly affects your survivability. Yeah. We crash a bush plane. It's important to know how to make a fire and purify some water and all this other stuff. But actually, one of the preppers in that space that I respect the most, one of the guys whose books I read all the time, Cody London.
Yeah,
he's been He's fantastic. I actually love that guy more than most of the other survival kind of dudes because he's such a hippie weirdo and his stuff always works, man. Every time.
Yeah.
Every time. But his Peace and Nature stuff really does work. But he addresses in one of his first books, he's been doing this for like 40 years or so, let's say. And he takes people out and, runs little like survival exercises and stuff. He says straight up, he's never seen, and he takes experts out too, like experts in the field. He's never seen somebody make it past like, I think 3 weeks on just natural stuff, like stuff, berries they got out of the ground, that kind of thing. And even if they start going past that, they're losing so much weight and so much body mass that he, as like arguably the best guy on the planet on survival, says it's unsustainable. Like, we have an agricultural society for a reason. Like,
I can't believe that. I didn't even know that. He really said 3 weeks.
I think it's that short. Maybe it's 30 days. It's some kind of time frame like that, though. But
he's got a couple books. I'm going to link them to our to the website so people can check out him. But yeah, keep going.
Sure. Yeah, and by all means, I'll look that quote up later to make sure I didn't make up a lie about code. I'm pretty sure he's the one that said it. That really actually affected me when that was probably 5 or 6 years ago that I read that, and I was looking at things. It's like that changes the dynamic on like survival, man. Like that's not good. And that's really what got me thinking on, no matter how bad it gets, like we have to maintain some semblance of community. That could be like a tribe of 10, 20, something like that. But you've got to have that. And that also has there's a big other factor there in that, you can't do everything yourself. It's impossible to know all the tasks that need to be done to, live on like a long-term basis, not a short-term basis. Yeah, whoever skins rabbits the best, whatever. We're talking long-term, like years and years down the line. I mean, you just can't know it all. Even just purely on the defensive side, the place where I'm an expert, I'm very upfront about this in the book. Like, if I actually threw my entire resume out there, like all these ninja schools and all this, bullshit, like, yeah. It reads like a student's resume of fighting with a gun. But I'm telling you straight up, like, I can't do this by myself either. Like, there's no.
Yeah. Well, you point out in the book too, even just things that I haven't thought about, like how physically fit you have to be if you're going to be in a long-term sustainable gunfight. Which I've shot, enough. I think I've shot, what was it? Maybe a little bit less than 300 rounds just through different guns and stuff. And I had a blister on my finger afterwards. And it was like, damn, so it's like I just got done reading like David Balava's book, House to House. I think that's how you say his name. The guy that he got Medal of Honor in Fallujah. But dude, when those guys got back from Fallujah, they were caked in blood. They hadn't had a bath in weeks. They've been killing people for a week straight. They all had diarrhea, so they all had shit sticking like all over their pants. He said He actually got to the point where he was shoving toilet paper up his ass. I mean, like it gets brutal and yeah. So you do need a community. The idea that a lot of tough guys have, where they think like they're going to go out and be a solo Rambo out there, maybe for a day. Well,
the other one that kills me in that exact thought process is the other guys that are like, I'll just get this adrenaline dump, then I can do like magic. Because I've seen this stuff where like, a mom picks up a F-350 off her child. Yeah, adrenaline will do amazing things for you, but it wears off. Like, I don't care how bad of a situation you're in, it wears off.
Yeah.
I've been in firefights so long that like you've gone through a couple of adrenaline cycles and you're starting to get like tired, like sleepy. Like people are shooting in back and you're like, oh my God, I need a nap. Like, can we end this? And that adrenaline will only keep you going for so long. And it's a matter of hours too. It's not a matter of days. Your physical fitness starts to matter very, very rapidly in like an intense like combat situation.
Yeah, we're going to get into that too a little bit in a minute, but I do want to pause for a second and just back up completely about where exactly are we at? Because when you wrote Prairie Fire, we were in a pretty bad spot, and you predicted the what was going to happen with the election. I'll give you about 85% right, because you said Trump's going to win in a landslide election night. happened. And then you said by Monday they're going to say it's Joe Biden, happened. Then you said we're going to go into a civil war. Now, depending on who you talk to, if you talk to a Democrat, they might tell you that January 6th was more scary than any scary movie, all the scary movies combined, and was the worst day in the world, and was worse than or was on the same level of Pearl Harbor, and was just this awful, horrible day. So I guess maybe to them you were right. But then you talk to a conservative and it's like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, man. But so that's why I'll give you 85%, because we had some civil unrest after it, but it wasn't, a full blown, you're on this side and I'm on that side. Do you still hold the same thoughts, or do you think that cooler heads will prevail and your book is not necessary right now?
I'm going to say kind of both. Now, yes, getting the election right, that was a huge deal. And basically what I wrote, though, the pieces after that was kind of a worst case scenario. And there was also a big impetus on me to get the book out before the election, because I thought we might go that way. Like, I thought we might go full up, like shooting each other. And so far we have not. And really, I could look at that one or two ways. Either we just haven't got there yet, because I don't think we're done. Or I could look at that as we've opted for the other glide path, which is the slow descent into either tyranny or anarchy. One thing I did not predict at all in the book was like the vaccine craziness and the mandates and like the further lockdowns and all this kind of crazy stuff, which it does seem like we're fighting back on, but like where I live, like there's those things of mass mandate. I cannot imagine living in New York City right now. Like, no. I mean, it's like a whole different planet. But I don't think they're going to let go of this control. So we could still end up exactly where I said we were going to go, or we could kind of end up in a place where, the empire doesn't blow up in fireworks, but it does just kind of stop functioning. Yeah. The governor of South Carolina was on today talking about how he will not let the Constitution be violated by the White House, which is like, ooh. like South Carolina, you kind of got a history here, bro. Let's calm down. but that kind of stuff is not that far out of the question. Not even like a secession or like some crazy shit like that, but more along the lines of like out here in the Midwest, like we're probably just not going to do it anymore. Like if they come out with some weird mandates, we're just going to ignore them like we did last time. And that kind of puts you up for a path where you kind of just build like a parallel system, and one day that's the only system you have. That's not that uncommon either.
Yeah, it is super odd because we're kind of already there right now, and it's turning into that with social media pretty fast. I mean, I think that more and more conservatives are going to hit up the conservative social media sites, and I don't know if that's for better or for worse, for everybody to just kind of go their own separate ways. And, if you're a Democrat, you're going to go live with Democrats, or you're going to go to your Democrat city. I don't know. It's like where I'm at, I heard somebody compare a face mask as like the Democrats' MAGA hat. And it's true. Like where I'm at, like nobody's wearing a face mask. And I remember this past summer, 2021, I went to Kansas City and I went to walk into a Wendy's, and it was closed on the inside, and it was all mask mandate everywhere. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, this has not been like this for a year where I'm at, but if you go to Omaha or Lincoln, they're constantly toying around the ideas of mask. It's actually been weird here because Omaha was going to do a mask mandate, and the governor was like, no, you're not. No, that's not okay. And said, absolutely not. So it is weird. It does boil down to, I'll say this, man. Actually, I do want to say this. I don't think we're out of the gate here yet. I think that we're going to see what happens in the 2022 elections. I think that after 2020, this November, things may balance out. Best case scenario is things balance out, things cool down, and then we only have to worry about who, the next presidential election. But I'll be honest, if it's not a red wave, which anybody who's being honest and looking at the data should see a tsunami coming. If it's not, then we're going to be in a different, because I don't think anybody would believe those results. I don't think anybody can believe that. So I think we're going to be up for a weird couple of years here.
I'll throw two things in there. One, I would love to absolutely be wrong about like this ever turning into a shooting. I would love to like 10 years from now still being mocked on social media like, oh, that idiot thought we were going to shoot each other and everything was resolved peacefully. Be like, wow, that's terrible. Awesome.
Yeah.
I would love for it to go that way. But I definitely think you're right coming into 22. I mean, even last night, Uncle Joe basically laid the groundwork for calling this election fraudulent if it's a red wave.
Yep.
Which is, oh man, come on. Like, that's part of the problem with this kind of stuff too, is just the political figurehead setting it up as it could be fraudulent. The big thing going into 2020 was that Trump's not going to accept a loss no matter what. It already kind of primes the fanatical factions for like bloodshed and freak out. But I mean, I think there's a very good possibility that if 22 is as screwed up as 20 was, whether that be results, cover the windows in the counting rooms, the algorithm starts doing crazy shit with CNN's numbers in the middle of the night, that could change the dynamic. Like people might like hardcore freak out, especially if this. I don't know what percentage of people believes that 2020 was fraudulent right now, but it's probably not that many. It's probably like 20% of like the right wing.
Yeah.
Because there's still so many people that are talking about we're going to vote in 22 and fix this, blah, blah, blah. If they get hammered again in the exact same way in 22, like a whole lot more of that population is going to be upset.
Yeah.
So, yeah, things might get real weird.
And you know what, man, and I'll say this too with the 2020 election. It's like I told my wife, I said, look, I don't know. I don't know about it. It's from what I'm understanding is like the claims that Trump made in public are not the same claims that he actually made in court, which tells me that he must believe in some capacity that he did lose fair and square. But I've always said this, it's not like there's been no smoke around this. It's not, these people don't believe that the election was stolen just because their guy lost. There was a lot of weird and sketchy things going on. And the one comforting thing with Biden saying like, oh, about the, the elections being fraudulent, they say that almost every time that they might get their ass kicked, they say before every election that it could potentially be fraudulent. You know what I mean? The Democrats do, the Republican, everybody does. People say it on a local level, which at least where I'm at, I guarantee you that's not happening. But it wasn't as if people weren't concerned with no evidence. There was some sketchy surveillance stuff. There was weird law changes. There was the media covering up for Biden, and not that Trump, with his campaign. I don't want to get into politics because obviously Trump didn't help himself in a lot of ways. But I'm saying is that if you're honest and you really look at what was going on and what was going through, each side's head, it wasn't like it was without reason that people thought it was stolen. And if you take away a free election, what else do you have left? How else is power going to change hands? So
you got.
I'll say that.
Well, that's part of all this is like. It doesn't even have to be true. It doesn't have to be like I can prove it in a court of law. The minute that like a significant number of people believe that they will never win at the ballot box again, the remaining options are pretty slim and none of them are good.
Yeah, correct. And here's the other, this is, and I've already talked to you about this and we'll talk about it here now. This is one thing though that I found was spooky and I'm trying to figure out, okay, why are they saying this? So major news network, the other day I Googled another civil war because I started seeing all these massive media headlines. So, and I sent you the screenshot. The New York Times, opinion, is civil war looming or should we calm down? Harvard Gazette, Harvard political scientists say U.S. civil war unlikely. Okay, this is this past week. This is that I'm reading these. NPR, imagine another civil war, but this time in every state. The Guardian, is the U.S. really heading for a second civil war? I sent that to you because I was saying, why are all these major media news outlets talking about civil war? To me, that's starting to freak me out. Is it's like, why are you trying to instigate something? What is your Green Beret take on that?
It's definitely not a good sign. And I can look at this two ways. I can look at this from the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, like, actually saying there might be a second civil war, that was like a weird position like 3 years ago. Like you had to be kind of a nutcase. Like nobody would take you seriously. Like,
Yeah.
And they wouldn't. I wouldn't. I would be like, that's not going to happen. You just got to be a nutter that believed in like the lizard people and like some other stuff, But as it's become, I believe it's not just talking points. As more and more people are talking about it and seeing all the indicators of this could go this way, it's kind of getting forced up into the media, for one. The second thing is it definitely does play into their narrative of January 6th was worse than, Fort Sumter and all this other stuff to kind of, rally the troops. So it actually both. I see more people coming to that conclusion, and I also see it's a narrative that helps further their ends of doing weird stuff like opening up Capitol Police offices in Los Angeles and Florida for some reason, which happened, or further militarizing the police.
Yeah.
Or the big one that I'm seeing right now, the purging of the ranks of the military for those that won't bend the knee. And that could be either ideologically or about the vaccine. I mean, one of the first things that the Biden team did when they stepped in office there with old Lloyd Austin, I mean, they said publicly it was their mission to root out radicals from the military ranks. That's a witch hunt. Like that's basically getting rid of people that are politically inconvenient for you. For the most part, there's a small, tiny percentage of nutters in there probably, but I mean, I spent 20 years in it or 15 years in the military. It was not a significant enough problem to warrant the Pentagon talking about crazy insurrectionists in the ranks.
Yeah, it's dude. Okay. This is what it seems like to me is that when you do these kind of things, you make the good guys leave, and then you can fill them up with whatever turd you want, whether that's an ambitious guy who wants a high rank or whether that's an ideological guy who's bad but aligns with you. What do you think that is? Do you think that there is a conscious plan to say, let's put pressure on these guys so the good guys leave, kind of like if you don't want to break up with somebody, so you treat them poorly, hoping that they leave you first, right? It's like, are they trying to put pressure on the good guys, knowing that the next guys that come in are automatically signing up for, like they know what they're signing up for by filling in those spots? Do you think that there's a conscious effort in the military?
Yeah, and it's not even new. Obama started this under his term too, right around like 2012, like when the wars were pretty much over as far as like major fighting went. There was a massive push to shove like all the warfighters out the door. As guys that actually went and fought an insurgency for 10 years, those are a lot more dangerous than guys you built yesterday that don't have any like actual practical experience doing it. So they came at it two ways. That's actually what happened to me. I went in to get some pain meds one time. I've been doing this job with these injuries that I took for like 5 years. And like 2012, I go in to get some pain meds or, acupuncture or some bullshit. And this doctor like opens up my file and is like, whoa, like you should have been medically discharged like years ago. I'm like, what? And right then, like press the button on the computer. And 9 months later, I'm out. I'm gone. And that was happening to a lot of people. They actually had teams of like specialists going back through medical records, looking for injuries that they could force people to retire on. Then as soon as they were done with that, that's when things got real crazy. That's when they went to what's called a quality management program, QMP. So then when they were done with the medical side, they went over and they went back through dude's record books from 15 years prior, looking for any kind of infraction. We're in the military, we call it page 11, Article 15. So you had dudes like literally like high up, like master sergeants in like special forces getting shoved out the door for something that happened to them when they were a private and ranger regiment in 1999. And it was not an insignificant number of people that shoved out the door that way. That's what we're seeing now is something similar to that.
Yeah. I noticed that Tucker Max got really a lot of people gave him a hard time for kind of coming out and saying kind of what he believes. He's run a very intellectual community. He said he got a lot of silent support, but if you would read the comments, people would say that no, it's not that bad. These things are basically circular, which to some extent are. I've had cops tell me that it seems like violence kind of ebbs and flows. And so, I told you I was going to run some numbers because I wanted to compare 2020 versus 1968. Because, yeah, you could say the same thing that in Vietnam, you had guys like Hackworth who were splitting the military, which was a big deal. You had somewhat of, I don't know how bad the purging was, but maybe somewhat comparable. But if you compare, 1968 versus 2020, and this is as best as a guy like me can do. I was looking online. I used different web browsers and I cross-checked on different sites. And I kind of looked at the averages here. I don't think that this is completely accurate, but I think it gives a ballpark of 1968 versus 2020. And the reason why I'm doing this is because obviously things smoothed out in 1968. Will things smooth out after 2020? We'll find that out. But in 1968, you had Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. In the riots following that, 43 people were killed, 27,000 arrested, 3,500 injured, probably about $60 to $100 million in damages, which nowadays is about 460 to 768 million in today's dollars. You could say maybe $1 billion in today's dollars if you really want to round up. That's fine. Okay, so then 2020, 25 deaths. Okay, so not as many deaths. And we also don't have the political assassinations either, which is great. So we're down there. 2,000 police injured, unknown number of civilians. Okay, when you look at modern medicine, that's not quite an accurate number, because if you were to treat these people using 1968 medicine, for all we know, we would have sat on 200 deaths or 100 deaths. Who knows? We've obviously got better emergency medicine. So as far as comparing deaths, that's I guarantee you we probably would have had more just based off of that. Unknown number of civilians. I have no idea if they're counting Chaz and CHOP and all that crap. I don't know what they're determining that for, but at least 2,000 police were injured alone. And we also know that random people were just getting the shit beat out of them too. So you got that. You got $1 to $2 billion in damages. Again, I don't know how far they're going into calculating that, but I think at least 1 to 2 is fair. I think when you really compare the numbers and you try to adjust everything for inflation and modern technology, I think things were probably worse, especially when you compare the fact that Martin Luther King Jr., he was an established figure, whereas George Floyd wasn't an established figure when he passed. I think that things today got heated a lot faster, and I think in a lot of ways are definitely worse. Outside of the political assassinations, which, again, I'm very happy that we don't have that, obviously.
Well, and the other one that we haven't seen is we haven't seen the bombings. That was a big one in the 60s that a lot of people our age missed. But somebody bombed the damn Pentagon. Somebody bombed the Capitol building. There were bombs all over New York City. And we haven't really seen that one this time, but that was a huge deal. There was a lot of crazy stuff going on with that. But yes, outside of that, this one has been bad though. It's been really bad. And I think the bigger problem right now, what we're seeing that we didn't see before, is a lot of this precursor genocide talk. And what I mean by that, are you familiar with the checklist for a genocide?
No, I'm not.
Okay, well, it's not an exact science, but there's a lot of people who study genocides that basically came out with this list. Here's how it gets done. And Rwanda is the one that gets cited the most.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what they all are off the top of my head, but there's all this stuff where basically you have to dehumanize your enemy and then get people riled up. And then there's these few other steps that go on before an actual genocide happens. A lot of the rhetoric that is being spouted out there, and it actually comes from 3-4 different fronts, is very much Radio Rwanda, getting ready to go kind of stuff, and it never gets banned from social media because that stuff always sticks. And the two that come to my mind most importantly for who's doing it, all right, you have the coalition of Black Lives Matter that are very much like we have to murder these colonizers and get rid of them, meaning white people generally. And the second one that I don't know how big that movement is, and I don't know how many people are involved with that, but it is happening. The second one, the one that should scare the hell out of everyone, is climate change is a religion to a fair number of people on the far left. Yeah. And one of the tenets of climate change is that you and your grandchildren are killing their God, which is Gaia, and you're doing it right now by your existence. And it doesn't take a whole lot to push that into, well, we should mass murder like 80% of the country so that we stop killing their God. So, I mean, that's something that I think people miss, like normal people, like us out here in the Midwest. Like, how could they do that? Well, man, there's like I said, there's a psychological preparation that goes into all this. And the other thing is, you know, how do you kill ants in your kitchen? Do you press on them one by one, or do you go get some chemicals and kill the whole nest? That's how they think of normal everyday people, as a nuisance and a pest, not a human being.
Yeah. Yeah, I for a couple of books for people to look up if they want to on the Rwanda thing, you know, check out Machete Season, and We Wish to Inform You That Tomorrow We Will Be Killed with Our Families. That's the book title. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Read that.
Yeah, I've read parts of that one, and people should check that out. People should also probably check out Ordinary Men. That one's been tossed out around like a lot. People have mentioned it, but yeah. The language is starting to get a little bit freaky. Another little stat here too. I don't know if there's ever been a time like now where cops are afraid to do their job. I mean, completely afraid. Retirement is up 30%, and recruitment numbers are astronomically low. So that also plays, and it might actually be lower than the 90s, which I think was a record at the time. So you factor in that too. I think a lot of people. Go ahead.
Going back to your death, the 68 riots, did you calculate in the increase in murders since the George Floyd riots?
No, I did not.
You got not. Like, and I totally get it. Like, if I was a cop, I would be trying to ride my car into retirement, like, because everybody hates them. They try to do their jobs and they get dealt with for it. And we called it the Baltimore effect. That one goes all the way back to Freddie Gray, which, good Lord, how many years ago was that? It doesn't matter. But, I mean, if you knew, like, dudes around Baltimore, like, straight up the cops were like, okay, you know, if this is what happens when we try to do our job, then we just won't do it anymore. We'll go eat donuts in a cop car, and that's it. But, I mean, I think if you went back and calculated the increase in murders for, like, Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, Minneapolis, I think that would skew your statistics like way.
Oh yeah, and and I can guarantee that that's obviously not even, you know, that hasn't even been you know, factored in. But yes, I read the book The Hiding Place a couple of years ago, and when I read it, I had this realization that sounds pretty basic, but I realized that it only takes about 5 years for a society or a country to collapse and turn in on itself. And obviously, you're always within 5 years of something, right? You can live until you're 90 years old saying, I'm going to die in 5 years. Eventually, it's going to happen. But what I mean by that is I realized that for an idea to spread, it only takes about 5 years for whatever that idea is, whether that's a communist idea or whatever, for that to spread and for that to turn a country around. I think it only takes about 5 years. And in that book, they talk about how they started noticing really bad, language. What was being taught in these colleges was spooked them out. And this was a few years before the Nazis rose to power. Again, if I lived in the 60s and I sent my kids to college and they became free love hippies, I'd be raging pissed and probably a little bit freaked out. So it's not, again, like it's the first time, but back then they were free love peace hippies. They were not what we're hearing now. What we're hearing now are people who want to do violence. That's also another major difference that make me think that, no, this is not the same as the 60s and 70s.
Well, I wish I had pulled up. 'Cause I didn't even know this. You know, it's one of those things like I didn't know the our discussion was going this direction. I wish I could pull up right now a list of all the politicians that basically encouraged violence while this was happening. Because there were a lot of them. There was
Oh yeah,
who exactly said what, but there was a lot of like, yeah, you got to make them get uncomfortable, or I'd be out there burning and looting too, and like all this other crazy stuff. Which is yeah, man. That I mean. You don't even have to have a specific example. It was everywhere.
Yes.
That is also a big problem. That lends authority to the act. And that's also a step of the genocide stuff. Like that's one of the ways that you get people to do it.
Yeah. I was going to ask you if America's biggest threat is internal or an external threat. I think it's kind of obvious that it's internal. I do want to talk about Russia and China here in a minute, but yeah, here's another factor of it too. I read Andy. I don't know how to say his name, but Andy, how do you say it? It's like NGO. Do you know what I'm talking about? He wrote the book Antifa.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't know how to pronounce
or whatever.
it.
Yeah, I feel really stupid for not knowing. Sorry, guys. But he wrote that book on Antifa because he's somebody who's been attacked by them multiple times. And when you read that book and you see that they're being funded by celebrities, like, the dude from The Office is bailing out rioters, or whatever. I think he was one of them. Could be wrong, but all these celebrities are bailing people out, and you start to realize like there's serious
corporations, man.
Yeah, there's serious money involved with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. So do you think that they just went away with their ideas? No. Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, I want to say the NFL itself promised like $1 billion over 5 years. Like, I mean, staggering amounts of money. Yeah. So this was not just an organic uprising or the extortion work. You can look at it either way. Yeah. And like I said, do you think that first of all, the people who are ideological, their idea that ideologue did not become realized yet. They have not had their utopia yet. So first of all, on that front, it's not over with. On the money side, maybe they did buy nice. Well, we know that some of the people bought nice homes and are living in nice neighborhoods. So maybe they want to chill out, but maybe they don't. Maybe now they're just better funded and just waiting. You know what I mean? Either way, they were very strategic about how they went about things. That's one of the things that spooks me out is because why would they just stop now? I do factor in the fact that some people were probably rioting just because they were bored during COVID, like, okay, I haven't been able to go outside. Now I can. This is something I believe in, whatever. But again, there's a lot of money that was exchanging hands in this time.
They stopped because the people pulling their strings told them to stop.
Yeah.
That's obvious. The only times that they've come back in the last year was outside of Kyle Rittenhouse's trial and outside of Derek Chauvin's trial. That's the only peep that we've heard from that organization. So it's pretty hard not to say that, their bosses, whoever was 37 steps up the chain of command told them to stop. Simple as.
Yeah. If you were in special forces right now, and let's say that this was happening in another country, let's say Canada, just to be funny, and they said, hey, we want you to monitor this, and you're studying this, as somebody who's in special forces, and you're getting intel, and you're watching, you see the bank accounts, and you see the movement and things like that. What would you guys be doing right now? Would you'd be picking winners and losers at this point, huh?
Well, definitely. It would. Let's say that we figured if we were trying to, you kind of had to pick a side too. Like, are we trying to stop it or keep it going?
Yeah.
If we're trying to stop it, like, oh man, probably,
silly things would happen to some people.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
Be some good protests. Let's.
I get what you're. No, because what I mean by that is that you would be the military would be concerned, would they not? I mean, if this is going on in another country, if this is going on, and that's what I mean by that is that this would be something that you would be studying. You would be. They'd probably send people out on the ground to say like, we got to either try to divert this or we got to do something here. You know what I mean? And it's happening internally.
last summer would have been looked at as a color revolution. And if we were trying to stop it, there's a way that we would attack it. And if we were trying to foment it, there's a way that we would, help fuel it. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it looked like. I mean, all that stuff is like, it basically looks like the new guy at Langley getting a PowerPoint brief, like, okay, we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this. Watau, change of government.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. That's what I mean is what's kind of freaky is that, if you're in the military right now, you'd be looking at it and you would be seeing steps of like, okay, this government's about to get overthrown. What do we do? You know what I mean? And again, I hope that we're wrong, but civilians aren't thinking like that. Civilians aren't connecting the dots. They just think like, hey, people are mad, and now they're happy. And it's like, well, maybe the mass amount of people aren't thinking about it, but there's people who now have money who are thinking about it, and that's what's right. That's what kind of worries me. Now, there was just some headlines over the past couple of weeks that the U.S. military was training for like a civil war. My understanding is that that's actually pretty common. Did you have training like that too?
Oh, yeah, especially this one that's been going on right now is actually a very famous exercise called Robin Sage. And it happens between 4 and 6 times a year. And it's actually it's not the graduation exercise, but it is the decisive phase of special forces training where you either go home or you're going to make it. Pretty much after you successfully do Robin Sage, like you're not going to fail anymore. Yeah. But this has been going on since like, I believe the mid 50s. All of North Carolina, pretty much outside of the cities, is like heavily invested in this war game called Robin Sage. And some of it, I mean, it's been going on so long that like families generationally have chosen a faction, and it's either Pineland or the Atlanticans, I believe, right now. And this was basically like a deal that got made back when like the communism taking over, like actually Russian paratroops showing up was like a very real fear. And also it was a perfect place to train special forces guys about how to do, insurgency and counterinsurgency. So it's this big scripted scenario. It's always the same. The Atlanticans invade Pineland. We got to go in and help Pineland, restore freedom by starting an insurgency or helping fuel one. But I mean, there've been entire books written about it. I think it might even be referenced in the John Wayne movie, The Green Berets. This thing happens like all the time, all the time. But for some reason this year, like people are freaking out. And it was the same thing a couple years ago when Jade Helm was going on. Jade Helm was just a bigger version of this exercise, and they happened to do it in Texas. But it's not uncommon. I mean, you think about it, like, where else is the U.S. military going to go train? Like, you can't like go to Mexico for a training exercise. Yeah. And so it's going to happen in the United States. There's always all this like crazy stuff about, we got to get land rights or use federal property or whatever. Yeah. So it's not that big of it. It's not a huge thing. In fact, people would probably freak out on the smaller scale if they knew like how many times military exercises were going on in like major cities. Like it's a lot more than you think. Really? Like live shots being taken across like downtowns from building to building and stuff for sniper. Like there's some wazoo stuff that goes on that like people never see.
That's crazy. See, and that's some people were like really freaking out about that because they're like, what are they planning? And other people were like, hey, just chill out. It's a common exercise. Again, I want to be reasonable about this. I don't want to just jump into let's get scared about everything. It's like there was a guy who was uploading a video on the internet of all these like tanks on a train. And he's like, someone want to explain to me why this is driving through South Dakota or whatever? It's like, because they do this shit all the time, dude. You just never noticed it. But, just because you see some tanks on a train doesn't mean your town's about to get invaded.
Because the South Dakota National Guard is tanking their tanks to NTC in California because that's the only place they can live fire them. And in 6 weeks or so, they're going to be going right back the other direction. Yeah. So, yeah, people do freak over stuff that's, I mean, hell, same summer 2017, 2018. There was all these videos of military equipment like, yeah, well, summertime is also when the National Guard does its 2-week training, like, because everybody's off from school or college or whatever. Yeah. Like, yes, there's an uptick in military traffic, but it's not what you think.
Yeah. So okay, there you go. Here's another thing that people have. I get heard a lot from people who don't believe in like people's right to have a firearm. I've heard this. They say like, well, what are you going to do? You can't fight back against the government because they'll just drone strike you. Can the military ever like, do you think if shit was bad enough, do you think that we would ever see something like that?
Well, first of all, you better go ask the Afghans and Vietnamese how that worked out for them. Turns you can fight the shit out of the U.S. government with like a bullshit rifle and win. Do I think it could ever get so bad that we're drone strike? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the United States is a little bit higher of a bar, but I mean, Obama drone struck a U.S. citizen.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't on U.S. soil, but yeah. I mean, yeah.
That's what, doing it on U.S. soil is a little bit higher of a bar, but yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I don't think it would take that much. I mean,
didn't the government like bomb Baltimore or something like that?
That was like some federal agency. But if you want to talk about like military specific, two instances I can think of. One, when that dude went crazy in the 60s, right after the tower in Austin, some other guy went crazy in Louisiana, was shooting people out from the roof of a hotel that basically had a similar type of tower. They just went over to the Marine Corps base and got a CH-46 and, I can't remember if cops shot him with rifles or if the 60 gunner actually unloaded, but it happened. Then fast forward into the 90s, man, it was like 97, 98. You remember somebody stole a tank in LA and was driving down the freeway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So this was like run over buildings and stuff. Well, it ended up that the cops got to him first and popped the hatch and shot him. But an unwell-known fact is that had to be stopped. So like 2 more miles down the road, they had actually got some Marines, I think, from San Diego or from Camp Pendleton with anti-tank missiles, TOWs, and like set them up in the middle of the freeway, and they were going to like blow that tank up. So like, what else are you going to do? Like,
yeah,
like, what are you going to do? So yeah, the concept of drone striking people on U.S. soil is not that far of a reach.
That was not the answer I was hoping you were going to give me. I'll be honest.
Sorry.
That's I think it's a logical answer. I think I'm in my 20s, so I obviously don't remember that tank thing. I think what's sad is that probably people my age only know that from like all of the memes people have made where they're like, when you get a new code in GTA and then it's like that picture of the dude in the tank or whatever. So yeah, but let's so right now we got Russia about to they're threatening to invade Ukraine, right? 2 questions here. Should we be worried about that? And what is China and Russia's relationship? Because I don't understand it. You make a comment about it in the book, but I think probably most civilians like me don't understand what the hell do Russia and China think about each other.
Okay, for the Ukraine one, all right, I got a really hard time with this one. Just like there's people freaking out all over Twitter, like get bread and milk because like Russia's going to do it and like everything's going to be explode and be bad. I just don't see it. Like I don't see it reaching out of that region is what I should say. Like I don't know if Russia's going to jump or not. They're making a lot of moves, but one of the things we like to say about the Russians is that the Russians we play checkers and the Russians play chess. Like they think in strategic depth. But they have brought in a lot of the right stuff. It really looks like they might go for it this time.
Wow.
I just don't see that being a big deal. Like, we fomented the basically overthrow of Ukraine's last government and got a pro-Western government in there, or a pro-U.S. government. I'm really not that mad about it if Russia invades Ukraine. Like, as long as we don't step in like idiots, like I don't really see how it changes our relationship. Number 2, with that, if we could get them to go ahead and sweep through Ukraine and go into Western Europe, that would be fantastic. Like that would be awesome. Like let's get, these people in Germany and England that are not obviously friends of freedom out of the way. I would support that fully.
That's a hot take.
Leave Hungary, Romania, and Poland alone. I like those guys. But Germany, France, like, please, by all means, do so. Which is probably not the answer that most people want me to say. Okay. All right.
No,
moving on.
Go ahead. No.
Moving on to China and Russia's relationship. Now, this one's also a little bit of a reach for me because I was not an area expert on Russia or China. I was focused on the Middle East for most of my career, but I can also look at what's happened now a little bit with my brain and see what's going on. Russia and China, while traditionally adversaries, which is not uncommon for powers like that share some border space, they really look like they're working together like a lot right now. I mean, they're big on working this currency issue. Russia is selling a ton of natural gas to China. I assure you that trade goes both ways. And I think they may very well be in that spot where while they will maintain a somewhat adversarial relationship, especially behind closed doors, Russia doesn't want to see China succeed too much and vice versa. They're definitely in that position where they will work together to some degree to thwart us in general. So, I mean, one of the smartest things they could do right now from a strategic perspective is hit Ukraine and Taiwan at the same time. I mean, what are we going to open up a two-front war over stuff that's really not our concern in the first place?
Do you think that they're having those thoughts? Do you think that that's a thought going through China right now? Like, well, if they jump, we might as well too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if it's even better from the Chinese perspective. If Ukraine does happen and we decide for some reason that we got to step in it and get kind of bogged down, that's a golden opportunity. I mean, they'd be crazy not to take that.
That's a good point. The weird thing is, though, too, is that although Biden's administration doesn't seem like he would do anything, when you look back at wars, I think I'm right on this, that like almost all the wars in the past 60 years, even going back to World War II, are almost all under Democrat presidents, I think, except for the Bush's Middle Eastern thing. But besides that, I think I'm right on that. So heck, you never know. You never know. But it doesn't seem like Biden's going to do anything, if they were to do that. So I guess we'll see. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's a weird thing to try and read. Like, I mean, that's a lot of political capital that he doesn't have to commit us to a war like that, as well as like, again, I've been retired for a long time, so I don't have like the classified intel or any bullshit like that. But with the forces we have available, like I don't know what we really would do. I don't see it. I don't see us being able to repel Russia out of Ukraine or China out of Taiwan with what we've got in the region right now. Yeah.
Well, not only the region, but I think we've had a lot of people leave the military. If I'm understanding it right, I guess I don't know exactly what, but geez, if you just, I'm sure just based off of how many people do we even have active, I'm not sure. Yeah. So also, I don't pay attention to anything that North Korea says or does. Is that reasonable, or should I be more worried about it? Anytime he threatens us, I don't give a shit. I mean, honestly, I just don't care. Yeah.
Well, I'm 40 years old. This has been going on since like the Soviet Union fell. Like, I just don't even give a shit anymore. Like, he shot a missile, into Tokyo. Like, okay, now maybe you have my attention. But he shot a missile over Tokyo. Like, whatever. Don't care. Like,
yeah.
Don't care.
Yeah. When I realized that Russia's like GDP was like the same as Italy's, and then you compare how big Russia is to Italy, it's like, I think Russia's got some outdated nukes, and, I don't know. I think that we should take Russia seriously, but I also think that people get a little bit too worked up about Russia. I think that China is the far bigger threat. That is something that does freak me out. I think that China alone, some of the stuff we're hearing from Mexico and their fentanyl stuff, they've already waged chemical war on us. That was one thing I wanted to ask you. Do you think that China would ever do something as overt as like putting fentanyl in like products to just kill random people, like, I don't know, food or something? Like, do you think that they would ever do something that overt or no?
Yeah, man, I think they already tried it with dog food like 10 years ago.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Man, it was it 10 or 20 years ago? It's been a while. But yeah, all these dogs were dying of just like, weird like shit. And basically it all got traced back to like, okay, this batch of Chinese dog food, this batch of Chinese dog treats. You could very well call that a test run, man. Like, yeah, I mean, they would need one or two things. They would either need good enough plausible deniability that it didn't look overt, or they would have to do it in big enough numbers to like actually like do some damage as a precursor to something like another kind of strike. I mean, otherwise, I mean, we'd make them pay for it. But yeah, I mean, it's not off the table.
So, okay. Let's kind of talk about, if you're good to keep going here, I was going to move on to, what people should do right now. Are you good with that?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right. So, what are the steps people should take now? Again, in Prairie Fire and Concrete Jungle, you do go into this about what we can do. And I think, we just painted a whole, we went into some pretty dark places just now, right?
Right.
Before we actually go farther with that, I'll say this. Do you have anything, what would be one reason of why you would say we should be optimistic that none of this would happen? Could you come up with like one reason why everything's going to be okay?
Oh yeah, man. Cause I mean, life goes on. Even if like I was a little bit doom and gloom in the books, I will definitely grant that. But yeah, I mean, I think there's multiple paths out of this. Maybe not for like the nation as a whole, but multiple paths out of this where like there's a happy ending for you or me, or like a large percentage of the country. Yeah, I mean, things don't always have to end badly. In fact, I would say one of the things that makes me the most optimistic is like, let's take the worst conspiracy crazy that there is on this. Like it's a globalist play to like take over and like basically lock us all in a super prison of social credit scores and all this other bullshit, which is possible.
Yeah.
Well, in order to do that, they have to completely like TF the way we live right now. Basically, they need a controlled demolition of the dollar in our society. Well, anytime that you start those kind of crazy like mass movements, the possibilities are endless for you screwing up. Like you think it's going to go like this way, but the minute you introduce that much chaos, it's very easy to have it reversed on you, and your ideology is like completely swept away by something from out of left field you didn't see coming. So, I mean, that's where a lot of my optimism comes from. Like, I think that if what's going on right now is a globalist power grab, I think there's a distinct possibility they've overplayed their hand, like big time.
Yeah.
And that the pushback on that will be, epic.
Yeah. Here's my reasons, I think, why. I think, number one, people are really happy and content and lazy, and that through technology, we've been able to be distracted at all times, which means that maybe the kids that are kids now and my kids' age, they're going to kind of see how people are acting and learn from it. And then they're going to grow up, and then they're going to find a way to resolve things in ways that are more civil. They may not want to be like our parents, just as if every generation, wants to do things better and different than the one before them. So there's some reason right there to be optimistic. With that being said, all the steps in your book, I think people should still do. It starts, number one, with yourself. You should work out and you should train. You can't be weak and you can't be a fat boy, right? Everybody should be doing that regardless.
Well, and look, man, you don't have to be a Calvin Klein model or an Olympic sprinter either, but like, do a little bit, just a little bit, get a little bit stronger and a little bit more capable. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was actually talking to a dude about this yesterday, like almost the exact same conversation. He's like, follow the steps of Prairie Fire. He's like, the worst thing that happens to you is like 20 years from now, I was totally wrong, was totally screwed up. He's like, you mean that you made me get in better shape and like know my neighbors more and like learn how to be self-sufficient? Like, why would you do that? Like, that's the community-based premise, man. Like,
yes.
And again, that's like the heart of what I want people to take from this. You have to be able to influence where you're standing right now. Like, social media friends don't matter when the power goes out. They don't matter at all. They can't help you. I mean, even if they just, shut down traffic between states for some crazy reason, some viral thing. Like at that point, like you and my relationship, like can't help you, dude. Like unless you can get here, get there.
Okay.
What does matter, right? Which is very possible for us. But what does matter is like my 20 neighbors that live in this little section of my neighborhood, and what we can do. And, do we know a place with there's a farmer that's got like some cows and, some stuff like, okay, do we have enough skills that we can bring to him? Like, we'll help you do your stuff now that we live in this different world. We've got some medical skills and some, I don't know, tractor repairs, all of this stuff. So yeah, at the end of the day, everything that I preach is the way forward. All it does is make you better within your own community and a better human being. And if I'm totally wrong, you've lost nothing. I mean, one of the big things that I like to say is like, you can't buy your way out of this problem. A lot of times with the like the prepper movement, it becomes like, okay, man, like you got to have like a bazillion guns and bullets and, all this whiz bang cool guy, generators, all this stuff. No, dude, like, no, skills and community matter infinitely more than that. And a lot of, community will solve a lot of those problems. Like I live in a town of like 3,000 people and we happen to have our own power plant. Do I need a generator and some gas? Or do I need to know the guy that runs the power plant and make sure he's got spare parts to keep the power?
Yeah.
It's a lot different animals. It's a much different look at things. And I think that's the direction people need to understand that this has to go.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, man. I felt this really deep connection, with my community. It's why I ran for city council when I was 19. I think I know that there's like a lot of stigma of like the loser that like never leaves his hometown. But I've always just felt like even if all my wildest dreams become true and I was a multimillionaire, I just always imagined myself here. And I was going out today and I was helping somebody where I was having to kind of go around my town, and I'm going and I'm dropping stuff off, and I'm looking around and I'm like, man, every place I've been to today, I have a story or this somehow, I was here in my childhood and I know these people. And, I live in a town of like 26,000 people, but it's like, I know so many people, and it's like, how does a guy like me get elected to when he's 22 years old? Because I'm interested in people, and I want to know the people around me, and I want to know the most interesting thing about people. And
Right.
I like to set people up, it's like, I wanted to connect you and Tucker Max when I found out that, you both kind of were familiar. I love that kind of thing, And I think that it's the same thing with this book, and Tucker has been saying it too, that it's not going to be safe places. It's going to be safe people. What that means is you're not going to, live in a underground bunker and be okay, regardless of what happens. How you're going to be okay is you're going to have strong relationships with safe people, and you're going to be able to help each other. That's the only way out of whatever comes next, good or bad,
100%, man.
Yeah. And so you go into that, then you talk a lot about, there's a personal responsibility that you have to take, right? So again, working out, training, but basically knowing how to defend yourself.
Right.
You talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I grew up doing mixed martial arts. We both know doing it, there's a lot of phony stuff out there that's going to get, could potentially get your ass kicked or get killed depending on what you walk into. So it's good to train with people who are legit. I think if you're at a gym where people are, fighting, on the amateur level or professional, that is probably a decent gym, because at least you'll know that, these guys are putting their money where their mouth is. So that's something. I don't know if you have anything you want to add on to that.
Well, that was actually, I felt like that was a very important thing, because I mean, one of the problems that we have right now as a society is we've, for the most part, like outsourced our violence. Whether that means like LE response, and basically it's come to the point where you could be a grown man now. And I actually had a dude under me in the special forces course, and we were getting ready to go to this after school, if you will, like hand-to-hand combat course. And, this dude is like 3 months away from getting his hat and his tab. And so we were ready to go to the thing because I'm like their squad leader. And he's like, hey, Sergeant, I've never been hit in the face before. And I was like, and, he was an only child. And I grew up in like some soft place, but it was hard enough to like do the stuff and get to this point. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, man, like for real. He's like, I'm really nervous about it. So I'm like, what how? And he was fine because I didn't hit him that hard. And I'm like, hey, dude, you see, that hurts, but you good. And he went on and we did this like brutal hand-to-hand combat thing. And it was great for him. He got more out of it than any one of the other of us did just because it was so like new. It was amazing. Yeah. But that was one of the reasons I had to put that part in the book is I've also seen over my life so many times where, man, it sucks to say this, but you could go learn some stuff for like 20 years, like breaking pine board, and it's completely useless the first time you get in a fight. Yeah. And you've just done this incredible waste of time. And, I actually got called on it after I put that book out by a couple dudes that were like, and I will grant there are exceptions. One dude called me that trained at like a super hardcore Krav Maga place in LA that was actually like staffed by like Israeli military dudes. And, I was like, hey, bro, I get it. Like, I did shit talk Krav Maga in the book, but I also said I trained with the Grom that did Krav Maga and they were awesome. Like I wouldn't want to fist fight those guys ever. So there are exceptions, but for the most part, man, it's got to be, MMA, boxing, kickboxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, something where you're actually like fighting other people for it to have value.
Yeah. I did.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, man, I did ninjutsu for a bit because that's kind of what the guys that started my gym were all about in like the 70s. Yeah. And, it always annoys me when people can't just they have to split hairs about something because it's like, of course, not your Krav Maga gym is bad. You know what I mean? But also, be able to admit that there's a lot of turds out there. Same thing with ninjutsu. Ninjutsu did not get a good rap with UFC because I think the only ninjutsu guy got his ass kicked in like 10 seconds, literally like right away. But like the gym that I went to, it was awesome. And we did some hand-to-hand stuff. They would literally turn the lights off and have us free spar in the dark.
That's awesome.
Which was crazy. But it was, like you just said, it was awesome because you learn, I gotta get on this guy right away. And You know what? If you're ever in a fight or you get jumped, it's probably going to be at night, know? So just like with shooting, you can't always train with the lights on. Try it in the dark sometimes.
Dude, absolutely, man. And, the same thing I said about like hand-to-hand, it goes across the board for all this stuff. Like you could shoot for 20 years. And if you've never like really been trained how to shoot and you just like stood and shot at a bullseye target, you're incompetent for the most part.
Yeah.
You do not know how to fight with a gun. So yeah, that was really the impetus there was like, you've got to get good training that's like relevant. And if your training is always comfortable, like it's probably not very good.
Yeah. I wanted to try to avoid talking about guns with you because I know that's a rabbit hole that you can go so deep on. And so I'm actually going to, I'll link some of your stuff there for people to check out. But, if I'm a guy who doesn't have any connections and I'm listening to us talk, I'm thinking like, well, that sounds cool, but like, what do I do with guns? Because with guns, the thing that's dangerous there is that you can get linked up with a guy that seems to know what he's doing who doesn't. You can be linked up with a guy that's been in the military, doesn't mean that he's great with guns. I hear stuff like, I had a friend tell me that she said, I don't shoot hollow points. I'm like, why don't you shoot hollow points for concealed carry? I'm like, why wouldn't you do that? Well, a cop told me not to do it. Like, what are you talking? Like, why is a cop telling you not to carry hollow points? Because do cops have to carry FMJs? Is that what the rules are for police?
No.
See, I cannot wrap my head around that, but you hear corny stuff like that all the time.
The only place I know where it's actually illegal to own a hollow point is New Jersey, where it's, I believe, 1 year per bullet to have one. Like,
okay.
Like I went to drive through New Jersey, I'd stop and like check the truck. Like, but yeah, other than that, no, I'm pretty sure that, that's completely ridiculous. But I mean, that's the point too, is like, it is kind of hard to vet these things, because if you don't know anything, like, you can see some whiz bang stuff that looks awesome and it's total bullshit. And that applies to driving, fighting, any of that shit. And there's a lot of bad information out there. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
This is what I would say if I was talking to a guy who knows nothing and all he has are indoor ranges. I would say, man, try to find somebody who's got an outdoor range or some land. Go there at night. This is what I guess I would try to do if I didn't know anything was first of all, you got to get your stance down and all of that, which is a whole other thing in and of itself, because again, you can learn some bad fundamentals. But if you can get some good fundamentals down, as far as training goes, try different things. Like, I would say, do some jogs, get a little bit out of breath before you shoot, and see how you do, when you're panting a little bit and you've had some stress. Shoot at night, shoot with the only light being, your car light. Try to mix it up like that. What else would you do for somebody to try to incorporate?
Man, especially if you don't know anything about shooting, go get an airsoft gun.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, I can't remember if I put it in Concrete Jungle or Prairie Fire, but did you know the story about the dude from Japan that had never fired a real gun before? He'd only shot airsoft, because you can't have handguns in Japan. Came over in like 2008 maybe, and trained for a month, and then won the Steel Challenge. The Steel Challenge. Yeah, no, I'm serious. A heart attack. It's referenced in one of the books. I forget the guy's name, but he did it. He beat Casey Estibio for the Steel Challenge. The Steel Challenge is a huge speed shooting event that's been going on the same since like 1975. A stupid airsoft gun, and as much as like tackle guys shit on airsofters, like, that's a valid training tool as long as you take it seriously and realize the limitations of it. It has no recoil, so you got to kind of factor that in. But yeah, man, it's a fantastic training tool, and one that's underutilized, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think all this stuff is what's great about martial arts is that, and I've taken the same approach to everything pretty much in my life, which is you learn how to do something dangerous in a safe environment. Right. And so it's the same thing with this. If you want to do, first of all, if you want to do things if you want to know how you're going to react in a stressful situation, join a fire department, because you're probably not going to get thrown into something, and volunteer fire department, obviously, find a volunteer fire department. I personally learned how I would react next to a dead body by spending a half hour in a car with a dead body trying to get somebody else out. You know what I mean? Now I know that, okay, I know that, if somebody's bone sticking out of them, I'm going to be level-headed enough to be able to help them. So there you go. It's the same thing with like paintball. You know what I mean? You could do paintball, and Dave Grossman, the author of On Killing, talks about this. Do something like paintball or airsoft, something that you learn how to shoot and move and whatever. It also, I think, kind of gets the play part of your brain active, which is great for adults to do, I think.
Great for training too.
Learn tactics there. That's what I want to do. I want to get like all my friends and stuff. I want to do some paintball stuff. I've never done it. I think it'll be, a lot of fun. I think that's a good one too. It's kind of like, even with how I'm going to raise my kids, it's like, I want to homeschool my kids, but I don't want to shelter them. I have Christian beliefs, and it's like, I think where a lot of Christian parents go wrong is they never tell their kids why people are atheists, when there are some really good cases to be made for atheism. So when I'm raising my kids up, I want them to read, Dawkins and the top atheists around, so that way we can talk about it as a family. You know what I mean? You can't just send them out in the world unsure of how they're gonna react. So again, I think you put yourself in some stressful situations and see how you react. And you're probably not always going to react the way you want to. I was thinking about this past year. This guy sped by my house where all these kids were playing outside, and I was going to yell at him and say, "Hey, slow down," and I didn't, because I let him drive by, and I realized I didn't say anything because I was afraid. Because if that guy wanted to fight, I wasn't ready for it. And then I thought about, why am I not ready? I haven't been working out. Okay, there's one. I haven't been in martial arts for a minute. There's two. So potentially, this guy's going to drive down the street and could hurt a kid, and I didn't say anything because I was afraid. So I don't like to live in fear. You know,
No.
David Belava in his book, this guy won Medal of Honor. In the thing that he actually won it for that house, he talks about it in the book. He first left the house where there was these insurgents because he was afraid. And then he said he had other experiences in his life where he had given in to failure. And he said, I'm not going to do it again. And he went back into this house and he killed all these insurgents, right? So even a Medal of Honor winner, everybody wrestles with fear. I think
dude.
that, yeah. Talk about that for a minute, because I'm sure you got a lot you'd like to say.
Fear's a huge thing. And, you know, I've met, like, in my life, like, probably one or two dudes that were, like, actually, like, legitimately fearless. They do exist. I'm not fucking one of them. And that's out of, you know, knowing thousands of fucking war heroes.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, it is something you got to struggle with. And there's even a lot of, like, fear of ego that keeps people from even getting started in training. That's a huge issue. Like, you know, being afraid of, like, you know, going back to the gym, or being afraid of having to tell another man, like, hey, look, you know, I've never owned this gun. This thing is supposed to be a manly skill. And now I want to buy one and, like, learn how to use it. But I'm acknowledging that I don't know anything.
Yeah.
There's fear that goes along with that. And there's also, you know, fear of the unknown, of just even like doing something like shooting a gun is going to be scary. Like, I mean, these are very real fears for people that have never, like, done it. And but the other nice thing about all this training stuff is that's where you start your first immunization to fear, is like taking the first step, taking the, like, I am going to go do this. That's part of how you get over fear, and you, like, take a little slice of it at a time and get over it.
Yeah. Oh, dude, ego kills so much. My dad always told me growing up, you know, never be afraid of failure. And that's something that I try to live by every day. And I think, you know, if you're afraid to go to you know, a class or whatever, because you're afraid that you're going to look stupid or whatever, nobody cares about you. Right. Nobody cares about you that much to give it a second thought. So, Clay, let's go ahead and wrap this up here. I'm putting all your books on the website at bookbrilliant.com. People will be able to check that out. Do you got any final thoughts that you'd like to say?
Man, we've covered some holes in this. Yeah, man, I would. You know, I really I feel like closing out with the fear thing is a really good one. Like, you just have to do it. Like, and you can start small. You can start with a tiny thing. I mean, you can start with, you know, your father-in-law teaching you how to shoot a gun, or you can start with get one of your buddies that you also know is scared and just go get some boxing gloves and, like, hit each other once, put a mouth guard and hit each other once or twice. Like, if you have to take, like, tiny baby steps to get over your fear, do it. Yeah. You know, you don't have to jump in the cage with Chuck Liddell on night one, but you've got to start making those positive steps to making yourself better, man. You just got to do it. Just got to. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have a whole list of books that you reference other people check out after they finish yours in your book. I'll put all those on the website as well. But Clay, I really appreciate you coming on here and talking about some high level stuff, but I had fun with it. So thank you, man. Awesome. I did too, brother. I appreciate it, man.
All right. Well, again, Clay, thank you for coming on. And I mean this when I say that I easily could sit down and have an interview with Clay for 5 hours minimum. No kidding there. We could go so in-depth about so many different things. So, Clay, thank you for coming on. Check out his website, claymartindefense.com. Link will be in the description. If you want to have what I think is some of the best threads on Twitter, go to @wayofftheres. That's res with RES, or just click on the link in the descriptions there. As we mentioned, thank you. Huge shout out to Tucker Max. Kind of an unlikely source for me to be introduced to Clay, but again, thank you, Tucker, for pointing me towards Clay. In that sense, every book, again, that we reference will, of course, be on bookbrilliant.com. Check it out, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you.